Hey there, it is Carmen here with Mako, and today we wanted to hop on here to go over some information using Mako's washes. So to start off, these washes are made with various metallic colorants and oxides, and these have been mixed together into a very concentrated and brushable formulation. That makes these a lot easier to use than if you were to, say, mix some manganese oxide in with some water and trying to brush it on. Since this product has been made with the intention of it being brushed on, it goes on very, very smooth and very evenly, which I've found somewhat difficult to do when you're mixing your own. So we do have 5 washes, and these consist of iron wash, rutile wash, manganese wash, copper wash, and cobalt wash. So all 5 of these washes can be used anywhere from cone 06 up to cone 10. As with any product that goes to a wide firing range, there can be some variability with the performance between these firing ranges. We do have the different results posted on our website as well as in our wash brochure. And then we will also review some of the different firing temperatures today as well. So these can be used in a variety of ways. You could use them as a body stain, so you paint the wash on and you wipe it away. You can layer it with other glazes in combination. They can be used with silk screens. And you can also use these in glaze trailing techniques. So the manganese wash is used really frequently with a trailing technique. All of our washes, we do not recommend them for use with dinnerware when they're used on their own, especially since there's a broad firing range for these. That doesn't always guarantee that the surface will be totally sealed and vitrified. So if you're layering it with a dinnerware recommended glaze and the surface is nice and sealed and glossy, then they are okay to be used with dinnerware. But if you're just using it directly on the bisque and the wash is left open, we would recommend to use that just maybe on the exterior pieces or anywhere that's not going to directly come into contact with food. And one more point, so these washes, we do get asked if they can be used on the bottom of pieces. If you are using it full strength, they can stick to your kiln shelf. Specifically at cone 6, all of them are going to flux out. At 06, you might be able to get away with it a little bit easier. The finish is a bit dry, but at cone 6, if you're using them full strength, we would recommend to not put it on the bottom of your ware. If you're antiquing something to leave a body stain just to showcase some of the detail or writing you have on the bottom, that's totally fine. It's just you don't want to be putting a full strength coat on the very bottom of your piece. So first, I would like to review our iron wash. So here we're showcasing different firing results from different temperatures. As you can see here, there is going to be some variation between the firing temperatures. So when you're doing low fire, cone 6, it's a lot brighter and it slowly gets darker and more metallic as you get more heat work. So the tiles here, they had 1 coat applied and then it was wiped away on the top section over the texture. The body staining is much more vibrant at low fire and it's pretty negligible when you get up to cone 10. Cone 6 does exhibit some body staining, I could have had it be a little bit brighter if I left it a bit, so that's kind of up to you. But one thing to keep in mind with the iron wash is that when you apply a clear glaze on top of it, it will eliminate the body staining. So if I had a clear glaze over any of this texture here, none of the body staining would showcase itself. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you really like this effect. And then I just want to showcase on the back of these, here we have these with clear glaze applied on top. So you can see the iron wash is pretty stable. At cone 10, you do get a little bit of mobility, so keep that in mind. But this is a really good product to use for silk screening, or if you're painting lines or something like that. It'll work really, really well for that because it is so stable. If you apply it really thick or the glaze on top of it really thick and you're firing it to cone 6, you might get a little bit of mobility, but then you'd really have to be working for it in that instance. So here I've got a wonderful sample showcasing iron wash used as a silk screen underneath our matte Mako Shino. So you can see it's very, very stable. And the color is vibrant and it comes through really, really well here. So like I said, this is a really good sample, good product to use if you want stability. This piece here was fired to cone 6. I've got one more cone 6 example, kind of showcasing actually where you can get a little bit of sag from the iron wash. So here we stamped iron wash directly onto the bisque and applied dunes over top of it. And here you can kind of see where the dunes started pulling a little bit of the iron wash down here. So it is relatively stable, but it can move a little bit depending on what glazes you're layering it with or how thick your application is. And I'm sorry, I think I actually messed up the order here. I stamped the iron wash on top of the dunes here. So that's why it was mobile, because that dunes has a little bit of movement to it. And with that being on the surface, it kind of encouraged it to move down a little bit. So this was also fired to cone 6. And I do have an 06 sample here. So on this piece here, I'm using iron wash. I have it on the inside here. I sponged it on this area here, so you can see the body staining is much less than it would have been. So this originally was this color, so that clear glaze really did eliminate some of that body staining, but I showcased some of the sponging. It came through really, really well. And then here I've layered white cobblestone over top of our Stroke and Coat honeydew list. And then I did one coat of iron wash on top. So you really darken this cobblestone here with the iron wash. And since the iron wash is stable, the cobblestone is going to maintain its really nice texture. All right, so next we have our Rutile wash. So our Rutile wash will perform pretty similar to our iron wash in a sense that it is pretty stable and works great for silk screening. Here we're showcasing the fired results at a variety of temperatures here. You can see that it is very stable, and this one doesn't actually provide quite as much body staining as the iron wash does, but it does get a little bit darker in color as you move up to higher temperatures. And I don't know if you can tell here, but in the cone 10 reduction, there is a bit of texture when it's used on its own. But that is eliminated when you're layering it with a glaze. So definitely keep that in mind for our cone 10 people. And then on the back here, we're showcasing it with clear glaze. So kind of similar to the iron wash. You don't really get a lot of mobility. The clear glaze at cone 6 does affect the color a little bit. It kind of bleaches it out as it gets applied heavier. And then when you're firing to cone 10, if you put the clear glaze on nice and thick, like look at that. So you do get some color variation and interaction at cone 10 when you're layering it with a thicker application of clear glaze. So that's pretty cool. But for the most part, it's going to be stable, kind of like this nice burnt orange color. Works great for antiquing as well as silk screening, kind of like we mentioned. And then doing any design work or line work, although this is a little bit lighter in color, so it might not always show up as well with line work as the iron wash does. Here we're showcasing it at cone 6, applied through a silk screen, and then we have Cinnabar applied on top. So this came through the Cinnabar. The Cinnabar did fuzz it up a little bit, kind of like reacting, but not enough to distort the image. So this looks really, really nice. This is fired to cone 6. I've got one more cone 6 sample here. So here we taped this design on there, applied one coat of Rutile wash over the entire thing, removed the tape, and then applied 3 coats of Cordovan. So this is Rutile in combination with Cordovan. That's how you get this here. I love these really stable products that you can use for combinations because you can use the combination to create a really cool design. And then I have this fired, this is our low fire sample. So here we've got this fired to 06. Here I applied the Rutile wash with a silk screen here. And then I applied our mudslide element glaze on top. And with this, I did reseed my coats because I thought that a full 3-coat concentration would block out the silk screens a little bit. So I only have 1 coat all the way to the bottom. You can kind of see here how it's a little bit darker in color. So 1 coat, the 2nd coat, and then 3 coats. So I did reseed these coats, and that was to encourage these leaves to showcase through the glaze since I applied it to the bisque. If I had applied this over the glaze, I might have lost a little bit of that crispness, kind of how the last sample with iron wash showcased a bit of sag. The mudslide glaze does break over texture, so it's relatively stable, but it does have a little bit of movement to it. So in order to keep these nice and crispy, I just applied them directly to the bisque. Next we have our manganese wash. So our manganese wash is going to be a wash that does add a bit of mobility when it's layered with other products, but in general it's going to be pretty stable on its own. It typically will add a brown variation and provide brown body staining, but does have a bit of a metallic edge to it when it's fired on its own. So here I've got the different firing temperatures, kind of a side by side. So at low fire, it's going to be really stiff and dry, but it does work pretty stable at this temperature. You're kind of missing out on some of that brown variation, so it's kind of almost under-matured when you're firing it to 06. When you get to cone 6, you can see that lovely rich brown and some of the metallic that kind of showcases itself. And then at cone 10, it melts a lot more, so it's spread out and it's a little bit lighter in color due to the additional heat work. So these are just applied on their own. You can see how some of them are a little bit shiny when you get to cone 6 and cone 10. So this will flux out on its own without being layered with a clear glaze. The heavier it's applied, the more metallic it's going to showcase. On this cone 6 sample, you might be able to see kind of on the edges there where you got the metallic variation, and that is due to the thickness of the application. So then the back here showcasing the application underneath clear glaze. So our cone 06 actually kind of gets this gnarly texture on it. So it's kind of reacting with the clear glaze. Our cone 6 sample, you can see the more clear glaze that's added, the more mobility that's going to happen. So, and this could be the case if you put more manganese wash as well, but for the most part, the wash is going to be really concentrated anyways. So if you want these to be mobile, obviously you want to make sure it's on heavy enough, but adding more wash isn't necessarily always going to be the best way to add mobility. Sometimes just adding a heavier application of the glaze on top can add that mobility. And then we have cone 10, and the cone 10 3 coats of clear really gets going, but you do still see that lighter color from the greater heat work. So here are a couple of samples using manganese wash. One of my favorite ways to use it is really just applying it around the rim and then putting glaze on top of it, and you get this lovely drip that happens. So here I applied maybe 1 or 2 coats around the rim and then 3 coats of turquoise on top of that, and that's how I got this melt that's happening here. So these drips are really nice and very consistent. You could do this in like a pattern, and like let's say you do 1 coat around the whole thing and then you do chunks. That's your second coat, so those chunks with the second coat would pull down further and you could get a cool design inside your bowl. And here we have it used in a trailing technique. So this is our peacock technique that we showcase all over everything. So here you can see the manganese wash really moved, and that's because this is on a small surface. I'm a heavy glazer and I put nice thick coats of the amber quartz on top of this, and that's really what created that mobility. And here I have it layered with a low fire glaze. So I kind of wanted to showcase these results just to give everyone a heads up about the manganese wash performance at low fire. I actually did this project twice, and both times I ended up with some pretty gnarly surfaces. This is the same project here. This just has manganese wash on top, and this has manganese wash underneath. So this project I applied oyster shell, manganese wash, and then our Sea Breeze stroke and coat. And you can see we get a little bit of surface texture here, and this one I had the manganese underneath the oyster shell. And then here I get a lot of texture here, and this I had manganese applied over the oyster shell. So this manganese was trailed on and this was brushed on, so you could see the thicker manganese created more texture. This could be your guys' answer to maybe getting a low fire magma, because this is cool and has a lot of texture, and it's actually more secure than the magma. It doesn't have like the bubbles in it necessarily. It's really dense. So I just wanted to showcase the different tests that I did with manganese wash with low fire glazes, just to give everyone a heads up, because this does produce a bit of texture when you're layering it in that way. And next we have our copper wash. Our copper wash will add a lot of metallic and green variation when you're layering it with other glazes, and it'll even add some when it's used on its own. So here I'm showcasing the different firing temperatures. So you can see it has a little bit of a green hue to it on the body staining and where the application is a bit thinner. And then you do see the metallic variation that showcases as well. So at low fire, it's going to be really stable, kind of just like this metallic gray. At cone 6, you get these beautiful metallic kind of blooms or microcrystals that happen, which is pretty cool. And then it'll showcase the green body staining or fuming around it. And then at cone 10, it kind of performs similar to cone 6. just maybe not quite as dark, I guess. This looks like it was applied a little bit thinner than our Cone 6 sample. And then on the back here, you can see the mobility that occurs when you're layering it with clear glaze. So here, even at low fire, you do get a little bit of mobility and this beautiful bright emerald green kind of float that happens. At Cone 6, you have a little bit more mobility, and that's dependent upon how thick the glaze on top of it's applied. You can see 3 coats on the right was more mobile than the 1 coat on the left. So that's 3 coats of clear glaze. So you still get the metallic and a nice green halo underneath. And then at Cone 10, you get really, really mobile, and even 1 coat of clear glaze adds mobility to this product at Cone 10. So be a little bit careful when you're layering it at Cone 10, when you're putting it with other glazes, because it is going to produce a decent amount of mobility. And then here we have the copper wash layered underneath smoke. So you can see this beautiful metallic color here. Really, really cool. And it's flowy and dynamic, so you get these nice drips that happen. And then here I'm showcasing copper wash by itself. So we have this on the bottom here too, where it added mobility, but not as much metallic. So that's kind of cool. And this edge here as well. So this is copper wash applied under smoke. And I've got this sample here, and this just has copper wash on the edge. And then the turquoise. So you can see where the turquoise was overlapping with the copper wash. It did pull some of that blue-green down. So when this is layered, it can be really mobile, but on its own, it can be stable. And then here, I'm showcasing copper wash at low fire. This I have, let's see, I applied cascades here first underneath everything because I wanted to make sure this copper wash was mobile. So I put the clear cascades on first, and then I added little dollops of the copper wash and then dollops of stroke and coat. So you can see the copper wash move down a bit more. And then I put sand and sea, no, not sand and sea, sea spray, our element glaze sea spray. I put that over the whole thing here. And that encouraged that mobility, because sea spray can add mobility even at low fire. It's pretty dynamic product. And the top here, I've just got our green tea crackle because I thought it would match. So here's a nice showcase of that mobility at low fire. So finally, we have our Cobalt wash. The Cobalt wash, as it sounds, is a cobalt blue product. This one kind of sits in between the mobile and not mobile ones, so it can be used for silk screening, but if it's layered with the right product, it can add mobility as well. So here we have the different firing results. So as you can see, at low fire, it's a little bit dry. It's kind of like this nice lavender color. You can kind of see some of the cobalt coming through, but for the most part, it's going to be sort of a dry finish. And then when you bring it up to higher temperatures, the cobalt by itself actually fluxes out really, really well. So we would still recommend applying a clear glaze or other glaze over top of this if you're using it for dinnerware. But again, these all had 1 coat applied, and then the top section over the texture was wiped away and just kind of left in those the texture there. So here we've got the cobalt wash underneath a clear glaze. As you can see, the clear glaze doesn't really add mobility. At Cone 10, 3 coats of clear glaze does pull it down a little bit. But let's say you layered this with a glaze that is pretty mobile. Like you put it with maybe green tea or something. So green tea can be a pretty dynamic glaze, so the Cobalt could have pulled down into that or added mobility. Or white opal is a really good example. That one melts pretty well. So that can add mobility. So if you're looking to do trailing or put it on the rim or something and want some of that movement to it, you can achieve that. You just might need to do some testing with different products in order to have that happen. And then here I have the same sample for the copper wash, but this is the Cobalt wash layered underneath turquoise with a silk screen. So again, you put the silk screen directly on the bisque. The turquoise is a very, very stable glaze, and this is a flat surface. So I knew that this was not going to move at all. It works really well for silk screening. So that worked really great there. Here I have a sample of it being layered with Himalayan salt and Capri blue. So here I've got like little dots of the Cobalt wash, and you can see the Himalayan salt pulls that Cobalt wash down because the Himalayan salt is a very mobile product. So the Cobalt wash kind of likes to just go with the flow. And then I've got it at cone 06 here. So this sample here, I'm using lavender flower, clear cascades, and Cobalt wash. So first I did these designs with the clear cascades. I did expect them to move a little bit more, but it didn't. And then I put a coat of Cobalt wash here, and then lavender flower over the whole thing here. So right here, this is from the interaction with the Cobalt. This is lavender flower on its own, and on the inside here, this is Cobalt with a clear glaze. So it's this beautiful, beautiful blue. Alrighty, so now that we have gone over different firing and performance results using our washes, I wanted to go ahead and do a demo of various application methods that can be done using our washes. So we did have a couple samples at low fire and at mid-range that we utilize silk screens on. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do a quick little silk screen demo using our washes. I am gonna go ahead and use the Rutile wash for this particular demo, but our iron wash and Cobalt wash would be great for doing this at mid-range, and then if you're doing low fire, the manganese and copper wash would perform well at low fire, in addition to the other three. So all five would be fine at low fire for using with the silk screen, and at mid-range to high fire, I would only recommend using the iron wash, Rutile wash, or Cobalt wash for that. So I've got my Rutile wash on a plate here. I'm going to take a bit of our silkscreen medium and just sprinkle it on the surface. So we're using this to basically just thicken the product, and that will make it so that it doesn't bleed through the silk screen. And this thickens up pretty well. I like to work it to get rid of, to have a more consistent and smooth mixture. I'll have a little bit more here. So you see how that's nice and pasty now? That's perfect. I just got my tile here. This is a cone 6 slip cast tile. So I will end up firing this to cone 6. So I've got my silk screen here. If you've not used our silk screens before, these are totally reusable. They come in an 11 by 15 sheet, and they're full of different images. This one is an image of a leaf, which I know is really hard to see. That's why we have it outlined here. But when you're silk screening, there's a shiny side and a dull side. The shiny side goes down onto the surface, and that ensures that you're going to get as much detail as the screen provides while also not having it bleed through. So I'm just going to take this thickened mixture and push it through my screen here. Great, so I've got my screen on here, remove it, and wow, sweet. So here is that screen detail using our Rutile wash. Looks really great, and then this should translate well through the firing that happens as well. And another great way to use our washes would be to antique or apply it as a wash. So I'm going to use the iron wash for that, just because I like getting iron on everything. I'm just going to scoop this out of here so I don't make too much of a mess. So as you can see, when it comes out, it's fluid, but not necessarily thin, really. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of water here, and that's going to make it perform more like a wash. So I'm just gonna add it to this little corner here because I'll still use the full strength over here too. So here I have my wash. I might even thin it a little bit more since this iron wash is so concentrated and dark. So just when you're using a wash like a wash, you want to thin it and then just kind of rub it over the surface here. On this I could actually thin even more. I'm just going to use what's remaining on my brush and see if I can get it to work that way. So on a lot of instructions there are notes to thin the wash, and that is totally optional depending on what your goals are with it. This particular application is great for thinning, or if you're antiquing it, thinning it's great too since you're wiping a lot of it off. Sometimes you can thin it for full coverage. A lot of the time, if iron wash in particular is put on a little bit too thick, you can get a little bit of texture. So these aren't things that you're going to be necessarily wanting to really lay on thick because they're so concentrated. So usually about one coat is fine, or if you're trailing it, that's good. So here I've got this applied as a wash, which it's kind of hard to see the variation since this is so dark. But that's one way to use it. If you don't like the staining, you could antique it a little bit. The iron, Rutile, and Cobalt wash would be great for brush strokes. So just, you know, doing little brush strokes designs. These ones are going to perform stable. So you can really do whatever you like, and it'll kind of stay where it needs to. Another way that you can apply these is, I have our brush strokes here, and then we can talk about just using it regular full strength. So the manganese wash is one of my favorites to brush on because it seems to just go on so smoothly. I really like brushing with it. So just doing a quick little brush stroke like that. So a lot of the time I'll do this on like the rim of a bowl or something and allow that mobility to kind of melt down. So that's one way to do it. Another way would be to actually use a trailer of some sort. So a designer bottle or a slip trailer. So this has the manganese wash in it. And this is something that I would just kind of trail on. So this is going to be a lot thicker of an application than if I were to be doing just our brush strokes. So definitely keep that in mind. If you're layering this in combination, this technique will produce more mobility than that. You can see how this is still shiny and then this is already dry. So if I wanted to, I could go ahead and add an additional coat of the manganese wash, but it's totally not necessary. A couple different things that could influence the outcome of the washes aside from the firing temperature, which we reviewed earlier. Just like with anything in ceramics, the clay body, the thin or thickness of the application, the glazes that you're layering it with, and even the firing process can affect the fired results. So if you're firing it with a hold, or if you're doing some sort of atmospheric firing, you're going to expect some variation with your results there. So definitely always do testing. As with anything in ceramics, you'll want to test it with your hand in your own personal practice because there can be a lot of variability with the results. In particular, with these products that are used with such a broad firing range, there's a lot of different factors that can influence the outcome. And as always, please leave questions in the comments. We love answering those and seeing what you think of our videos and our products and how we can help you the best. So we really appreciate your interaction with those, everybody. And yeah, as always, make it Mako.